Hi, everyone. Nice to be here with you all. And thanks to those of you who are hanging with us for more incredible programming today. My name is Rohana Nathu. I'm the founder and CEO of Spectrum Impact, an impact investing consulting firm. And I am thrilled to be your moderator this morning, afternoon, evening, as Stacey said, to talk about corporate perspectives around advancing gender goals. I have the great privilege of being joined by Enki Toto, who is a senior manager of the impact investing team at Salesforce Venture Fund, and also Sarah Marshall-Murray, who's the chief partnerships officer at Kiva. And hopefully today you'll be able to hear directly from two individuals that are representing organizations that take partnerships quite seriously around what it means to build corporate engagement in gender. And I hope to keep us moving along. So right before asking Enki and Sarah to tell us a little bit about where they work and what they do and what gender means to them, I wanted to just offer a little bit of framing around what we're talking about today. So particularly when we're thinking about corporate engagement around gender, there are a few ways that this show up. And I think all of you here in the virtual room are experiencing a version of this. There's certainly business model outcomes that I think we've seen increasing research suggesting that having actual diversity, particularly around gender, but also other factors, actually leads to better outperformance on the balance sheet and at the corporate bottom line. And that's represented by gender diversity at the leadership level, but also gender diversity across the workforce. And then there's also the increasing role that women play specifically around household representation. So in the United States, for example, women are almost 50% of the head of household for married coupled families. So there's a lot of conversation and nuance here that we can talk about, not just about furthering goals at the corporate level, but also what it means to begin to better meet the needs of female customers, borrowers, clients, and heads of households. And so hopefully in our conversation today, we'll be able to tease out a little bit about how corporations can push that agenda, and also some of the things that Enki and Sarah have learned around what works and what sometimes doesn't work, hopefully imparting unto you all some wisdom around how to go forward. I would love to kick off Enki and Sarah with a little bit more of get to know you. So tell us who you are, tell us a little bit about Salesforce and Kiva respectively, and then if you could share with the audience how you invest in impact. Enki, let's start with you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for that introduction, and it's great to be on this panel with both of you. In terms of Salesforce, I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with Salesforce itself, but this has been around now almost, I think we just had our 23rd birthday the other week. Large enterprise software company, publicly traded in the US, and we're really helping solve all the needs around digital transformation for your business, for businesses both small and large, those on the Fortune 500, for example. As part of that, in the beginning days when we were looking to build out our ecosystem, we started the Salesforce Ventures Fund. And that was, as I mentioned, really part of building out the ecosystem, investing in founders that were building companies that would somehow work with Salesforce or partner with Salesforce or be built on top of Salesforce. And as we as a company have grown, our potential ecosystem has also grown throughout. And so that's, about 5 years ago, we started the Impact Fund as part of this growth trajectory. And with the Impact Fund, similar to Ventures, we are investing in that ecosystem. We're investing primarily in enterprise software companies, but we have both at Salesforce and within our fund a vision that business can also be a platform for change. And so we deploy our dollars into companies that have a measurable environmental or social impact. And so part of our investment thesis is to invest in companies around education, workforce development, sustainability, financial inclusion, as well as tech for the social sector and digital health. So lots of different areas that, with lots of companies, increasingly an increasing number of companies, which is wonderful to see many more founders building companies that are really targeted towards changing and helping solve some of those critical problems and crises that we have in the world today. And happy to cover also just venture is a weird term, but we typically take ownership in a company, so about anywhere from 1% to 10% of a company, and in return for that, we we deploy capital, we have advisors internally that work with these companies, we work on impact metrics with them, et cetera. So lots of different ways that we partner with our potential companies. And we also invest typically at the Series A through C stage. So these are companies that are not yet huge and ready to go public, but at the Series A, typically just starting out, have $1 million in revenue and are really looking to scale, and at the Series C have already scaled, but are looking to further grow themselves and, ultimately, hopefully become a public company.
That's so awesome. No, thank you, Anki. Yeah, there's so much more that we can pull apart there. So thank you for that. Sarah, let me turn it over to you. Anki said something really thoughtful about business as a platform for change as it relates to the Salesforce model. And I think that's equally as true for the Kiva model. So share a little bit with us about whether that's true. Feel very free to correct me. And then also a little bit more about how you all think about impact.
Great, thanks so much. And absolutely right. Very similar and analogous. Kiva was founded with this idea that people weren't fulfilling their human capital due to the limitations and opportunities of freedoms that don't come when you don't have access to capital to live your best selves. And we truly believe at Kiva that the evolution, the innovation that happens in our society today comes from entrepreneurs around the globe. And that lack of access to capital we've seen now documented and academic wonky pieces to all the way through to more consumer driven pieces, whether it's sustainable development goals or other ERG bodies of work that talk about how financial inclusion is a prominent positioning in that enablement. And so Kiva is now an umbrella organization 16 years in, while we take in loan capital from crowdsourcing, which is what many folks on this call may have become familiar with Kiva about over the years, all the way through to impact investing within the MFIs and our small and medium businesses and others who we believe might have an outside impact on the lives of those who have been unbanked or who've been left out of the formal financial system. And to your point, Rihanna, I think our underlying thesis or reason for all of that is that connective tissue, that bringing that back helps us to make sure that we have the power of all included in, and it just begets more success and more opportunity. So really excited to be here today and sort of be able to try my best to represent the many corporate partners who Kiva has had the pleasure to partner with, to work with, to think about, and to see whether through Kiva or in other ways engage in gender investing.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Sarah. So maybe let's jump right in with, I think, what seems like an obvious question, but I think there's lots of deep and nuanced opinions and perspectives around this. And that is whether corporates actually have a role to play in gender equality and whether they have a responsibility. I think we could probably wax poetic for the rest of the day on whether that is an opportunity or whether it's a responsibility, but would love to hear from both of you, not just your own personal take on whether that's true or not, but also how Kiva and Salesforce respectively are thinking about this opportunity/obligation trade-off. And maybe Sarah, let's start with you as you sort of take us through some very, I think, catalytic corporate partnerships and engagements that Kiva has sort of been behind.
Yeah, Rohanna, thanks so much. And you certainly, an apology to those, my dog seems to want to join the conversation as well. She has very strong views about this, in that, anytime you're a part of a system, you have a responsibility and an opportunity for how you act and engage in that system. And capitalism is alive and well, and a part of the world's ecosystem. So whether and how is, I think, where the question should be and where we'll probably head for the rest of this panel, versus if there is opportunity for gender investment. I think it's sort of, at least at Kiva, a foregone conclusion. So now it's about how are we taking the learnings and understandings and, as we heard a little bit from the other panel, innovating our products and iterating on those till we serve, and dedicating the wealth of knowledge that we have towards advancing gender investment.
I think that's right. Anki, what about you? How is the venture fund thinking about this?
Well, just echoing Sarah, I definitely don't think the question is if they have a role, but how they have a role. And I think I was looking up a few statistics before we were on this panel, just to see how many people within the US actually work at a large company, at a corporate, or even at a mid-sized company, right? These are still large companies. And it's over half the population. So it's hard to say that the over half the population that is being employed by an employer is, those employers don't have some kind of responsibility to make sure that they're doing everything they can around gender equality. And, and that I think expands into lots of different equality measures that they should be taking around race, et cetera. So definitely not a question of if they have a role, but, I think at Salesforce, this is something we've always really thought about. And one of the reasons I'm proud to work here, a couple of years ago, one interesting thing Salesforce did is they actually did a pay equity analysis just to see how, what is the gender pay gap here and how do we fix it? And they put actual dollars behind it, right? And once they did the analysis, they trued everyone up. They report this out publicly. Believe it also shows up on our 10K. Most recently, they launched a gender equity report just to exactly help other companies also make sure that they're doing everything that they can around pay equity. But on the impact fund, and I can talk more about the Salesforce side later, but on the impact fund, we back diverse founders, and we're proud that over 60% of our portfolio is either a CEO or a founder that is a female or underrepresented minority. And that is unprecedented in venture when looking at only 2% of all VC-backed companies have a female founder, which is it's just wild. I mean, that is a horrific fact. It is a statistic that unfortunately does not seem to be getting better, even as we see more and more capital deployed into venture. It was one that the pitch book noted has actually declined. There's less females getting founded out there. So, it's a problem that we absolutely need to fix. We are very conscious of this issue, and that's why we support these founders and look for the solutions that these founders are building. I'll say, we also see a lot of founders that are in this space because they're solving the crises that they themselves face. So we do have that added benefit of founders understand the issues, right? They understand, we supported Ellevest through an investment because they understand women invest differently from men. There's a different approach that they take, right? So it's founders like that are just building the platforms that are addressing exactly what we're talking about here today.
No, I think that's right, Enki. And I think I mean, that statistic is consistently shocking. And I think the thing that we hear the most from our clients, actually, who have not had a long track record in investing in gender equality and are really passionate, is that sometimes they're missing the why. And I think what is so incredible about where the gender equity space has sort of evolved to is that the framing around opportunity, I think, is really exciting, right? So in a Salesforce venture fund context, it would just be folly not to look at every great idea that affects every demographic, that has every investable market opportunity out there. And so that means you need to be talking to people for the diverse experiences and diverse backgrounds. Similarly, on the Kiva side, we know that there's such a long history of access to capital and gender deeply, deeply integrated. So there is sort of this sense of like, that's, I'm making things up, Sarah, but that's X number of our borrower base. That's X number of our communities. That's X number of families and children and downstream impacts around education and healthcare. And so I think what I'm hearing from both of you is a similar coalescence around this idea that like the good to do part of it is important, but the imperative part of it is really motivating the conversation. If you don't have a gender equity response to the work that you do, you're actually probably just missing out on real honest to goodness opportunity. And that doesn't feel good to everybody, but I think especially when we're talking about moving billions and trillions of dollars, that needs to be a part of the conversation. Sarah, is that fair? Does that come up in a Kiva context?
It completely resonates. I mean, with 80% of our borrowers around the globe and our lenders at 60, 70% women, it is a reminder every day that the society that we have, the structures that we have were built, I'm famous for now saying this analogy before. It's like assuming that we built everything for right-handed individuals and then realized 50% of the population was left-handed. And we haven't built anything for that community and we haven't thought it through. And so what's great about where we are and what gets me excited about that opportunity, right, is the accumulation of knowledge, the awareness raising. It is getting more and more challenging to ignore the basic facts in our society today, which is great. So now comes the opportunity for how do we, and when we talk about impact investing, the ability to start with that lens of, well, wait a second, if I want to have outside impact in the world, if I want to be impact first, I immediately have to have a gender lens. Like there would be no way for me not to start the conversation as an investor in it. And so it opens the door to the possibility of then really being able to narrow in on other unique factors. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about, how each corporate partner and or organization has their own lens that they apply to things. But at least you're starting from a recognition of the what. We're all in this for the why of a baseline of the same. And that's exciting to be getting out of just having to articulate and advocate for seats at a table. I've had the pleasure of working with Sheryl Sandberg before, with Sandy, just so many powerful, wonderful women, Ngozi and Kanji Iweala, women who worked really hard to just get seats at tables and be heard as leaders. And I'm excited that we're in a place and time where that isn't just the baseline anymore that we're looking for, but now it's about really diving in and iterating and understanding the nuances and the differences when you have a gender lens focus.
That's so right, Sarah. And I that's a great opportunity, I think, to double click on some of the tools that you both mentioned. So I think in the Salesforce Impact Fund example, we have a beautiful story actually around enterprise support and what that looks like to actually deploy capital. And on the Kiva side, we have this incredible opportunity to sort of look at the role that partnerships play to move other massive allocations through demonstration and just not going at it alone. And Ki, maybe we'll start with you. Across all of the tools that corporates can use, obviously the venture fund is one incredibly catalytic one. What are you using at the fund level to try and promote gender equality? How is it showing up? Where does it show up in the process? Anything that you can share with us on how to actually program for that in the investment structure?
Yeah, of course. I'll start by, I should have mentioned this before, but one of the reasons to, as Sarah mentioned, capitalism is alive and well. And as venture investors, one of the key things we want is also returns, right? We think that the reason we do venture investing is because we think the for-profit model does work, and you can do that for good and have that impact tied to your revenue growth. And as part of that, female founding teams just end up doing better. Like there's multiple studies that have shown that they do better. Female CEOs lead more successful companies, they have higher growth. So I think that's an important distinction, that this isn't just, because it's not just nice, it's imperative for business. Like you have to do this if you want good returns. But in terms of tools, I think our balance sheet is one of the biggest places that we use this, right? It's investing through our fund. We host a lot of events. We've built networks and communities, and are also just more open to cold reach outs from founders. I think, when we think about venture, it tends to have this aura of a very closed off community that unless you know someone within it, unless you get a warm introduction, it's really challenging to get time with a fund. So we try as best that we can to be open to all those, both cold introductions, which tend to be from, women who might not know anyone in venture, since it's also a predominantly male dominated industry. But we also do, like I mentioned, our pay gap. I think that comes through our income statement, right? It's putting dollars to work. It's taking a hit to your P&L annually, quarterly, and making sure that you're doing right by your employees. I think another tool, I guess the finance person in me is coming out on, but on the P&L too, it's building programs. Once you hire individuals, you also have to promote them. You need to make sure that they stay. You need to have the right tools for them to succeed. And I think that type of mentorship, unique support that specifically speaks to their goals is important. And I think that similarly stands for founders as well. It's both. You're investing in founders and you want them to succeed, but they still need that support. So it's being open to helping them grow through their journey and being a supportive individual and supportive investor, as well as a supportive company to work for. know that they have your best interest at heart and will help you grow into your next role.
Enki, I'd love to stay with you for a second because I think there's something just unbelievably catalytic about saying we're deploying our balance sheet to pursue this goal, and we're doing it kind of in an unapologetic, return-oriented way. Although I'm putting words in your mouth, I know that it's far more nuanced than that. I think that's really just incredibly impactful for all audiences, but particularly this audience, because there is an opportunity really to demonstrate that through how capital is deployed. But then also there's a commitment clearly to take care of Salesforce employees and employees of the fund and live gender equality, not just through deployment, but also how your own resources are going. I know that's not without its difficulty. Can you speak a little bit, particularly on the deployment side, about some of the unique issues that you face funding women and minority founders? You spoke a little bit about sort of the insular network, which I know is a huge one. What else are you seeing when you're actually trying to identify these entrepreneurs and then support them through the fund?
It's a very fair question, and I don't think you put words in my mouth. I think we are unapologetically saying, we invest and we want to do good, but we also want returns, and part of that is because we think that's how this continues to grow, and it is growing. You see much more institutional capital that historically hasn't been focused on the impact part, is really focused on returns for their LPs, kind of joining in and starting their own impact fund, starting to invest in similar deals as we do, which is great. I think that's a great proof point for the industry. It's a great milestone that we've hit, because clearly this is working. Those returns are getting generated. In terms of the challenges, it's definitely not without its challenges. I think one of them is the stigma around it, like people just thinking that it's concessionary, right? Oh, because you're investing in diversity, it means that maybe you're concessionary, and we 1000% don't feel that way. We back the ideas and the companies and the products that our founders have built, but I think it's more that external view of, because it's in this type of fund, it's concessionary, and that's why we also, it goes hand in hand with what you said. That's why we're unapologetically saying we want returns, because we don't think that, right? We think that these are supportable businesses. They are building best in class, in our case, enterprise software, and we need to fund them. Otherwise, we are missing out on future returns. So I'd say that's one of our biggest challenges. And then, we see it less. I think part of it is because we have an all-female funding team. So our networks tend to be other female investors. I was joking with a friend of mine that I only know female VCs. So the world and bubble that I live in is maybe very different from what everyone else is living in. But I like it. I like my world. And I think it's just, getting to know those founders and understanding also how they approach problems maybe differently. As I mentioned it before, women approach problems differently. So I think you need to have that lens to it. And I think that grows over time.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that this level of portfolio engagement that you're speaking to is also something that I think we're seeing in funds that are taking a much more intentional gender approach. It's not the formula. It's in fact an evolved way of thinking about taking care of your founders and taking care of people. And so it's not at all surprising to me that that's just directly woven into how you all think about deploying capital. Sarah, I feel like Kiva is behind some hugely catalytic partnerships in this space. And I don't say that just because we're here, but I think particularly just over the course of the organization's history, from microfinance all the way now to the million different types of capital that you're deploying and trying to reach people with, partnerships is a big part of the backbone. Can you talk us through a little bit about how that tool is leveraged to pursue gender equality? And you don't have to tell us all of the horror stories of your day-to-day, because I know that partnerships are not always easy, but anything that you have to share with us about how you actually use partnerships, particularly at the corporate level, to try and pursue some of these goals.
Great. And happy to share with hopefully not too many wounds and stories along the way. But I think, we all know that we learn from our failures as well as we learn from our successes. And I think one of the things that I'm so excited about being a Kiva and being part of it is that's baked into the DNA of innovation. And being unapologetically impact first and being unapologetically starting in a nonprofit frame of inquisitive of like, while capitalism as a system exists and is great and thriving, it is not working for everyone right now. Okay, but why? What are those barriers? Why is it not working? What can we do differently? What's our contribution to that? How are we helping? How are we not? And this constant question of why that is baked into every conversation we're having internally spills over into how the strategic partnerships team, our impacts team, our entire ecosystem goes about sitting down in conversation. So our network of MFI and small medium business leaders, it's a conversation. It's not a we sit over here with loan potential capital and then it's just this transactional process. But really, when we think about our due diligence internally, it really is this long process of understanding and uncovering and asking questions and then innovative and trying. And that happens also with our corporate partners. They're iterating, they're trying, they're figuring it out. And that means being patient enough to recognize our first two conversations maybe with the wrong investment, right? It might be their CSR colleagues who are thinking about one lens and have heard something about Kiva or have one piece of information, and we start that conversation. So what we try to really do is to leave as many of our biases at the table before we start a conversation and really explore, what is your purpose? What are you trying to accomplish? Can you help us articulate what it is you're trying to do? And then let's see if within the Kiva umbrella and suite of products and services that we offer, there's a home for your goals that we can collaborate on, or let us make sure we can help you find that ecosystem. Because to Anika's point, one of the great benefits that I've had the pleasure of uncovering and coming to Kiva in 2019 was the value of having been born out of crowdsourcing, is that Kiva's culture is already one of inclusion and one where every voice feels comfortable speaking up and having a place. And that extends into the network of alumni, volunteers, others who are offering networks and people. And so it moves through our borrower community and that referrals of others. And so it's just it does require a significant amount of listening. It means you're going to get it wrong sometimes. It means you're going to translate what a partner is trying to accomplish wrong sometimes. But it's recognizing that intentionality of meeting an organization where they are and trying to figure out that shared purpose. One of our values is honesty and kindness. And, I love that value because it allows us to speak very frankly with folks. Kindness is not wasting their time. It's the one commodity I can't give you more of, right? We can figure out how to make more money. We can figure out your skills, but if I can shorten the life cycle of you understanding this ecosystem, or I can better understand you faster, then we're doing our jobs.
Sarah, it's so beautifully said, and a reminder actually that investing in gender equality is not just about outputs and outcomes, it's also about process. So one of the things that we see all the time is bias in the process. That Enki had spoken a little bit too, but you are hitting the nail on the head when you think about how to structure a conversation. And I think that that's perfectly demonstrated by this global shift we're all undergoing from shareholder capitalism to this idea of stakeholder capitalism. That in fact, there are multiple different interests in a corporate structure that are going to determine whether the corporation is successful. And now more than ever, that is community and employee and leadership and shareholders. Can you talk a little bit about what stakeholder groups in those conversations that you're having around corporate partnerships do you feel like are really, really focused on these gender-related goals? Where are you seeing the groups that are really, really impactful? Where are you seeing the groups that need to be brought along, especially for folks in the audience that are parts of corporations that are trying to get these conversations started?
Yeah, great question. And one that I'm iterating and learning on as we speak. I am very fortunate to have an amazing team of colleagues that are listening, and we're trying to create some thematics and understandings without generalization, without assumption. And one of the most important things to highlight for our audience today is the dynamicism of the corporate world. I love that we try to put industry boxes and say, oh, the financial system's doing this better, or folks, but everyone is trying to figure out what the right structure and model is for them. So we've seen engagement from DEI ERG groups. We see bodies of sitting in the CSR world. We see a massive amount of movement now into ERG officers in the C-suite, which is a great evolution. I'm sure Anika can tell you, like she probably is funding some of those individuals. I mean, it's just a really dynamic movement. I think what I get really excited about is seeing that percolate up and down across an org. In that, one of the evolutions we've seen a lot of in the last 5 years is the cross-fertilization between the philanthropic side of the corporate organization, the head of their foundation, if they're large enough to have one, or the person who is allowed to think about and manage those day-to-days, with the impact side of the conversation, whether that's the internal impact on the employees and their engagement, or it is the external impact they'd like to have in the world that aligns with their corporation's personal mission and purpose. And that means going all the way up into board members now. You know, we're very fortunate, Kiva, to have a phenomenal female board chair, Julie Hanna, who's been, just an inspiration for me and so many others, in having these network conversations and understanding like what's going on and inspiring. But we're seeing more and more of that happen and connect that tissue to shorten that conversation of who does everybody need to be in the table. But I think it's rare, and one of the probably biggest takeaways I would say for the audience and practical knowledge is know that you're probably going to have to talk to 5 to 6 different individuals internally in order to get the right group of humans together to make a meaningful investment happen, whether that's treasury and the philanthropy and the impacts team and maybe a data scientist. It really just depends on the org and their purpose.
Partnerships is living work. It's as much art as it is science. So I think that guidance is very well said, because it doesn't just happen overnight. You need to build these relationships. I want to stay on this idea of how quickly things have evolved. And thank you to those who have been throwing questions in the chat. We have so many, and we will get to as many of them as we can. But keep them coming. We love them. Enki, maybe for you, over the course of the venture fund, I can imagine that the way that you invest in gender equality has changed a lot. Everything from process to output, or maybe it hasn't. Maybe I'm making an assumption there. Can you talk a little bit about the 1 or 2 things that have changed most significantly, if at all, when you think about gender equality outcomes in the way that you all actually deploy capital?
It's a great question. I joined the fund about 3 years ago, and I'll say what has never changed is our commitment to it, and just unrelenting commitment to it. And I think that shows up, it's part of our core, and it shows up when we decide how to schedule our week, right? Which meetings will you take? Which meetings will you not take? There's only 24 hours in a day, and we need to be very, very strict with our time. And so that means leaning towards more, taking more calls from female founders and having that be part of our priority. But in terms of the outcomes, I think one thing that one of our founders did say to us is the way that we approach bad news is really stood out to her, because it's, you need those investors there when times are good, and everyone's really excited when times are good. And when you're hitting your metrics and you're beating your metrics, everyone is your best friend. Everyone loves you. Like, you are the apple of their eye. But it's also, which many companies say, times when you're not hitting those metrics. And I think that's what we've seen, and what we've learned, to be honest, is how do you support founders in those times? How do you approach it with empathy, with real understanding, and also help them when they need it and in the ways that they need it, versus being overbearing and, just telling them, why didn't you meet these metrics? That we found just isn't helpful. So, I would say that speaks more to the trajectory of what our founders have seen versus what we've seen. But on our side, it's just continuing to commit. And like I said, it's taking more calls, making sure that we are meeting with a lot of female entrepreneurs. It's making sure that we know those groups, that we're able to talk to them, and also, like I said, understand their challenges and how we can uniquely help them there.
I love that. I love that. The level of engagement is not, you said it so naturally and lovingly, but it's not without an incredible amount of work. So I just want to call that out. Like, it is very hard, I think, to lead and support empathetically and not just procedurally. And so huge snaps to that, because I think that's hard to come by, actually. Sarah, what about for you? What has changed in the work that you do to pursue gender equality in the last 5 years? How's the conversation changed?
Yeah, I just want to echo that. And again, just such an important point of that, being able to have empathetic feedback loops and that patience, we use the word patient capital, but it really is such a dynamic, it's part of the art, as you referenced earlier, versus the science of what we do. And in the past 5 years, Rahana, to answer your specific question, I mean, Kiva has changed drastically in the last 5 years, in that Kiva Capital Management was born in the past 5 years. So we recognized, all the listening, learning, and understanding and due diligence that our investments team on the microfinance side of the house had learned over the years, and the advent of how deep technology has allowed us to continue to serve a global community and audience, that we'd proven that with the right investments in microfinance, you can do it well, and you can invest in more than just the transactional nature of the loan, right? Like Kiva got started with this idea that the loan was the important thing. And while that access to capital is still a core tenet to who we are, it's the wraparound services. It's the understanding, as Anika said, it's knowing like that deferment of a loan payment for 6 months is revolutionary to the empowerment of that female business owner and that entrepreneur. And it's recognizing that we all live through change together. And nothing gave us more opportunity than the past 2 years to learn how to be nimble and flexible. I say it, if you're going to go into impact investing, take an improv class, because it's so important to understand that you have to evolve with the dynamics of the market that you are serving and the world that you are a part of. And nobody could predict, even though we have some fabulous scientists, exactly how this pandemic was going to affect us all and continue to affect us. And so pivoting and creating really thoughtful products. I'm very proud of the investments teams coming together and listening and hearing and creating the crisis support loans that Kiva did. The growth of Kiva Capital Management in launching and seeding a $32.5 million refugee fund to serve displaced individuals globally has demonstrated, the core tenets of who Kiva is, in that while many times people come to Kiva thinking we're going to be able to be a human rights or emergency relief type nonprofit organization, it's the recognition that Kiva is actually not probably your first port of call, but that second, that smoothing, that financial health, that really helping somebody to feel empowered and engage. And the knock-on effects and the implications of that means that they will continue to be able to help their families and their communities and societies, because they're now over that one hurdle, shall we say. And so in the past 5 years, being able to see the value of the Small Business Relief Fund and the Refugee Fund launch and our engagement in the consortium of individuals doing the California Rebuilding Fund has just been really immensely satisfying professionally, and also awe-inspiring. What acts of individuals can do together to collaborate and use the power of the financial tools and products we have in our global society today to really have push boundaries to have more impact in the world.
I love that. And Sarah, you talked a little bit about the evolution that Kiva has gone through to try and deploy and use different types of capital. I also feel like you all occupy a very unique cross-sector partnership space. So not many asset owners out there, for example, work with nonprofits. They work with asset managers that then invest in for-profit companies. Kiva doesn't do that. That nonprofit, for-profit connection is very strong for you all. I imagine that's a different type of partnership. Can you talk a little bit about what it means when you partner with a nonprofit versus a for-profit, and some of the distinction there in the work that you do?
Yeah, that's right, Rahana. Kiva has always been a unique entity in and of itself, as the social impact org born out of tech sitting in Silicon Valley, but also working in global financial inclusion from a nonprofit frame of impact first, right? So it's kind of taking the best of each part and trying to apply it to how it collaborates. It means a significant amount of communication has to happen internally for those different parts of the organization to work well together. And it takes a significant amount of opportunity to explain and communicate that externally as well. And so the way in which we partner, to your point, globally, as well as with corporations is really important for how we represent ourselves, being clear about what we can and cannot accomplish, who we are, and where we fit into the ecosystem becomes very important in those conversations. And so, we have a whole different team that spends time landscaping and paying attention and doing the de-risking and the recognition of the investment portfolio itself. I mean, coming from for-profit, some out of Deutsche Bank, others out of who have run and managed and closed funds prior with deep. I think we have something like 140 years worth of experience on the GEFI Capital Management team from other funds, but then marrying that with the years of rigor and information and data that Kiva has had the pleasure and privilege of being a part of helping to collect for the ecosystem as large. And this conference alone is a great example of that. The investment USAID made in Kiva to be able to take the time to explore, to learn, to understand what gender equity investment was going to look like in this new modern world as we evolve and really think about who the actors, the partners were, and then share globally. So others, we like to say the biggest success for Kiva will be copycat funds. Those who recognize, because at the end of the day, that's the goal here, right? We're de-risking, we're recognizing and bringing people in to a financially inclusive world. So the second somebody else says, oh yeah, right, the return seeking here is great. We know we're onto something.
I want to stay with that idea of inclusivity and opening up the tent and then hopefully crowding it in. Enki, maybe we'll start with you. Who are we missing in this conversation? We talk about actually deploying capital for gender equality and equity. Who is not a part of the conversation that we all need to be thinking about, in your opinion?
I mean, I think this question a couple of years ago actually would have been a very different answer than where we are today. I think there's so many individuals that have joined the conversation. I think when we were, a couple of years ago, we would have said, we need more men in the conversation. And I'd say now the men are just as part of this discussion as we are. I don't know who this individual is that's not part of it that I'm thinking of in my head, and I don't have a title for them. But one thing I do see is as we constantly look to hire in leadership roles more and more women, and as companies want to, rightfully so, and we're so excited about it, but have more board members that are women, have more executives that are women. I think one thing that we need to be mindful of is, are we supporting and promoting the existing workforce to actually lean into those roles? Because so often the exit is, well, there's no one that's qualified to do this, therefore I have to go with someone that I know. And I think it's a failure on behalf of us having promoted enough in the past, right? And having a big enough pool of individuals to choose from. But I also think it's needing people to be more open-minded into what that means and how can you actually pick from within your organization potentially, or pick someone lower that's able to grow into this role and give them the tool set that they need to grow. And I know I mentioned this before, so I feel like I'm definitely repeating myself, but I think that's a part of the conversation that I think comes next. Obviously, now we know it's important. We know we need more gender equity, but how do you get there? And how do you make sure that you can do it quickly?
I love that. I think that's exactly right. And it's self-reflection, right? Like we are all on a learning journey. So those changes can be as much about who we invest in as they are how we sort of do that. Sarah, what about you? Who in your sort of view of the world is missing in the gender equality conversation?
Such a great question. I really appreciate Anika framing of it. I add to it somewhat selfishly or maybe boldly that I think we're missing several voices still. I mean, we've made a lot of great progress, but I think there's still real progress we need to make on women's participation in data science, engineering, the voices that are designing how we collect our data, how we then design the products, are all part of, we talk a lot now, and I'm grateful that we're having these conversations about leadership at the board and in the C-suite. But the everyday decisions about how you're pulling your algorithms or determining what the data looks like, which is what the board is going to make the decisions based off of. So if they're getting data that's biased, we're starting already from a back foot. So I think really encouraging and thinking about that next generation of leadership in engineering and data science is an important flag. All of us at Kiva really believe strongly in the women's voice inside that community, as well as then, I'd say just, the consumer. I have really appreciated the refreshing of our new CEO, Chris, coming in and just reminding us every day of the importance of talking to our community, understanding what everybody in the ecosystem, we all do this, but we can get complacent sometimes and like, to your point, Nika, just be mindful about every day I need to have a conversation with the end user of the products and services of the fund, right? And like, if everybody in the ecosystem is happy and it's working for everyone, the returns will come, and the impact will come. And at the end of the day, that's the meaningfulness that's happening here. Is there's a lot of ways to make money. Impact funds are not the easiest return-seeking capital you can do, right? So people aren't showing up now simply because of the returns. It's the returns plus, right? It's the impact plus returns that is the perfect marriage here. And so we just need to keep pushing on that, understanding those feedback loops and shortening that to Anika's point. If we're going to scale, we have to shorten and use all the tech tools in our arsenals to move faster.
I really appreciate that. There was a question that came in over the chat that actually fits pretty perfectly into this broader conversation of who's missing, that I'm happy to take a stab at answering. And that is that what are we doing about parts of the asset owner and asset manager communities that are not paying attention to diverse teams, founders, diverse governance, or diverse customers? And I guess I would say in the work that we do, because we work directly with asset owners and asset managers, that there is definitely a power shift that's happening around decision making. So I think that we've noticed that diverse asset owners, particularly women and young women, are demanding from their advisors a ton more engagement. And if that's not happening, those advisors are being fired. There are a ton of incredible impact investment shops that have started to pop up now that provide discretionary services around assets that have no problem considering impact or considering gender lens on the investments that they make or the investments that they recommend. And we have clients that walk in that sort of say, I'm on the precipice of firing my advisor and I don't feel too badly about it. And so as dramatic as that sounds, I definitely think on the asset owner side of things, we are starting to see those individuals feel like they have a lot more power in already a pretty powerful constituency, right? We're talking about high net worth individuals. We're not talking about the majority of people. We're talking about where wealth is concentrated. On the institutional side, I actually think the opposite is happening, where the court of public opinion is more powerful now than it's ever been before. So we're seeing some of the largest endowments in the United States, ages old universities and colleges that have simply had a return-seeking goal pretty much since they were started, be very, very susceptible to 144 characters on Twitter, be very susceptible to students on campus with posters and signs saying, I'm not interested in being in this sector or this industry. I'm not interested in ignoring this particular constituency. So for where power feels concentrated, the individual voice is increasing. So for the folks that we're really looking at where asset owners and asset managers can move into the space, as glib as it sounds, I think voice matters now more than ever. And we remind our clients that in the spirit of many, many, many stakeholders and not just shareholders, you need to be able to answer everybody's needs. It no longer suffices that you're ignoring your employees when they're asking, where are the women on our board? Where are the women in management? Why are they just in these industries? And why are they not in investment roles or in the C-suite? So I think that's shifting. I think that there's a lot less tolerance, I think, And it's one of the reasons why we're such big proponents of ESG. It helps you consider that risk. Is there operational risk because you haven't thought about a truly inclusive work environment? So hopefully more to see there. And thank you for the person that sent in that question. I have one specifically for you, Enki, and then I'm mindful of time. We shockingly only have 10 minutes left. Don't really know how that happened. So we'll start to move into cool down, if you will. But Enki, what are the main barriers that you see for some of your peers, particularly on the venture side, around allocating for impact? Particularly given that you're having these conversations every day and Salesforce is really a leader in this space. At the fund level, at the VC level, what are you hearing your peers say that's stopping them from doing this work?
That's a great question. And I know that's me buying myself some time as I think about it, but I mean, we're fortunate. I think it's a little bit of a different dynamic inside our own venture fund, just because we work so closely with our traditional venture team. And one thing we've been really excited to see is their own commitment to investing in more female founders as well. So I think and that's come from the way they've hired their team also, and that's trickled down into them being more mindful. So I think we're well poised to see more growth there. And I'll also caveat with a lot of my peers and other venture funds are also impact investors. So like I said, you just have more individuals that are building solutions for these exact issues that they're facing. There's a tremendous transfer of wealth that is going to go to women, multiple trillions of dollars. People will have to listen to that. And with that wealth, investment funds will also have to listen, because that otherwise means them not meeting their, LP requirements, right? And we actually see a lot from our peers of their LPs pushing them to have more diversity in their founders, more impact investments that are, particularly helping solve around financial inclusion as well as sustainability, because obviously the climate crisis is also hitting women more so. So we're battling a lot of different crises out there. But I think it's really coming from that LP base.
Well, and my hope is, and you said this so thoughtfully, my hope is actually that we all move to a much more sort of integrated way of thinking, that gender equality is not a women's issue at all. It has deep tentacles in how we treat the planet and how we treat children and how we treat the elderly, and the list goes on and on. And so the narrative that's really been resonating with the folks that we speak to is that it's a business risk imperative. If you're not thinking about every constituency out there, you're just sort of missing the mark. And I think Salesforce and Kiva have both done a beautiful job to talk about gender equality as an everyone issue. And that's hard. That's hard to do. It's not, I don't say that simply or easily. I think it's really hard to strike that narrative authentically. I think with the time we have left, I would love, for those of you in the audience who are within corporations or within funds or even within your own family office or nonprofit trying to figure out how to do this, how do you start investing for gender equality? How do you do it with corporate partners? Both Sarah and Enki, if you could offer some words of wisdom or guidance or direction to folks that are trying to figure this out for the first time. And maybe Sarah, I'll kick off with you if that's okay.
Great. I appreciate it, and really appreciate this conversation today, and for everyone joining us on it. I think everything is as simple as starting with the brainstorm, the whiteboard, of understanding what about your corporation's commitment to gender equity shows up, right? Salesforce clearly had an understanding of a place where they wanted to show up and went after it, and then equalized and created that balance. And so I think being honest with what the corporate, is it who you're servicing? Is it your customer base? Is it within the ranks of your employees? Where is it that you're trying to show your purpose, and making sure you're being authentic to that? And from there, then the opportunities start to present themselves pretty clearly. Whether it's you want to lean into something you're so proud of as an organization, and or you're trying to right a wrong and or fix something you intuitively know is wrong about your business model. And so that's the first place to start. And then from there, it's about the conversations. It's about reaching out. So, we hope to be a resource at Kiva, not just for Kiva, but for gender equity participation across the ecosystems that we have access to and knowledge on. But really, it is starting from understanding the why. Without the why, the rest will just get very convoluted really fast.
Absolutely love that. Thank you. That's very wise. Thank you. What about you?
I'll just say, don't be scared once you start digging in, because you'll have to do an assessment of what you've done well and where you've had shortfalls. And I think this goes for investors as well as, corporations trying to understand this. Don't be scared of the potentially not so great metrics that come out of it. Because I think it's such an opportunity to change and to improve. And so it's embracing those metrics and just figuring out, how do we do better? It's figuring out those metrics to begin with, because you start with little roadblocks or little stepping stones, and then you get to do more. But then I'd also say, just don't stop. I think you'll have to have multiple conversations. Sarah will know this better than I, but there's multiple conversations. I know starting the fund was not a one conversation, and there you go. You get a couple $100 million. It's about continuously proving and continuously having these discussions, understanding why it's so important to your company, your stakeholders, your shareholders, and everyone, and sharing that internally as well as externally.
I love that. I think for me, what I'll add in addition to what you both have said is that gender equity exists not just in the outcomes, but also in the process. Enki, you had spoken earlier about the stigma of investing in women. Sarah, you had talked earlier about having to almost circuitously navigate your way through multiple teams and multiple places to have the right conversation. I think what we've learned is that you can invest in gender in your process, whatever your process is. That could be how you screen and scan funds or investees. That could be how you choose your partners. That could be how you choose your LPs or your own stakeholders. So for anyone out there who's saying, I just don't have the bandwidth to start a gender equity fund right now, that's perfectly fine. Gender equity is an integrative process. And if you make investment decisions or partnership decisions at all, it can show up. And it's about asking tough questions, asking the right questions, and then really measuring how you're doing, which I think is scary. I think no matter what, like you had sort of said, like, oh gosh, like if the results are not good, are you going to run from the room? And I think hopefully everyone in the audience has sort of seen and felt from both Kiva and Salesforce's examples that it is an iterative process. But if you stick with it, and if you sort of ask yourself some tough questions, it will get to a point where you have something for the rest of the field and the industry to really copy from and learn from. So I'm beyond grateful, Sarah and Enki, for being a part of this conversation, bringing your wisdom, bringing so much, I think, candor and openness to this conversation so that we can all move these goals together. An incredible gratitude to you all for staying with us, hanging out and talking about corporate perspectives and gender equity. The three of us could do this all day long. So thank you for sharing your time with us. I think now I'll hand it over to Sarah to provide some closing remarks for the day and announcements for what to expect from day 3, and just gratitude abound for the time to chat with you all. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Rahana and Anika. I really appreciate not only your perspectives, but you're just reiterating so many beautiful insights that we're all learning together, and that's part of the importance of commitment to this gender equity work that we're all imbibing in the world. So really just great conversation, and so honored to be a part of it and to bring Kiva's perspective into the conversation. I really appreciate all of the questions we received and your active participation. I know virtual conferences are something we're all getting used to, but they can be challenging as well. So we really appreciate that engagement. We're hoping you'll stay with us. Quick teaser, up next is a networking session where you get to do some of the talking and engaging with others and learning. I hope you'll stay with us and join one of those conversations, or all 5 of them. You can move around, and there'll be more about that in the chat and links to that Zoom commitment. I'm really excited about some of the new partnerships that we're talking about. But during the conference, I heard a little bit earlier on the panel prior to the corporate panel, where we really heard some very innovative things from our colleagues at Brock and otherwise. And so hope everyone's been able to enjoy these conversations live. But before I jump over to the networking session, I wanted to just highlight what you might be hearing if you're joining us tomorrow for our final 2 sessions. Well, we'll be discussing how to optimize the use of gender data to inform investment decisions, and a second session on how blending finance is being utilized to drive women's economic empowerment. So we have some amazing speakers for tomorrow, including Aflore Tableau Foundation, Data2X, our colleagues at DAI, Kiva's very own impact team, and 3 lending impact investors, Canarthy and MacArthur Foundation, and USAID. So I hope you'll find time in your schedule. Again, I know time is precious, so we really appreciate you join us tomorrow. For now, I'm going to hop over to the network sessions, and I hope to see some of you in there. And again, the link will be in the chat box for you in just a moment. Thanks again.